On a rainy afternoon in Boston, single dad Michael Harris, a hard-working mechanic raising his little daughter alone, rented out his spare room to a quiet college girl. She introduced herself simply as Emily Carter, carrying nothing but a worn backpack and eyes full of secrets. To Michael, she was just another student struggling with life. But he had no idea that this shy tenant was the only daughter of America's most powerful billionaire, and her arrival would turn his world upside down forever. The rain had been falling steadily over Boston's working-class neighborhood for 3 days straight, turning the narrow streets into rivers of murky water that reflected the dim glow of streetlights. Michael Harris stood in the doorway of his small auto repair shop, watching the water cascade down the faded sign that read Harris Auto Works in peeling blue letters. At 36, he had the weathered hands of a man who'd spent half his life under car hoods and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much loss too soon. His broad shoulders filled the doorframe, his sun-darkened skin a testament to years of outdoor work before he'd settled into this cramped garage. His short brown hair was perpetually mussed from sliding under vehicles, and his blue eyes, once bright with youth's optimism, now carried a permanent shadow of grief. 3 years had passed since cancer took Sarah from him. 3 years of waking up to an empty bed and a daughter who still sometimes called out for her mother in her sleep. The medical bills had eaten through their savings like acid through metal, leaving him with nothing but debt and the crushing weight of knowing that all the money in the world couldn't have saved her anyway. Every morning, he rose at 5:30, made breakfast for 7-year-old Lily, braided her hair the way Sarah had taught him, and drove her to school in his beaten-up truck that coughed black smoke at every stop sign. Then came 10 hours at the shop, his back aching, grease under his fingernails, fixing other people's problems because he couldn't fix his own. The evenings were the hardest. After picking up Lily from after-school care, he'd stand in their small kitchen, trying to remember Sarah's recipes, usually settling for mac and cheese or frozen pizza. Lily never complained, but he saw the way she looked at other kids' lunchboxes, packed with homemade sandwiches cut into perfect triangles and little notes from their mothers. He did his best, helped with homework he barely understood, read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, tucked her in with the same prayer Sarah used to say. But the house felt too quiet, too empty, like it was holding its breath waiting for something to change. It was Lily who suggested renting out the spare room. "Daddy," she'd said one evening, her small face serious as she colored at the kitchen table, "maybe if someone else lived here, you wouldn't look so sad all the time." The words had hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd thought he'd been hiding it well, keeping his grief locked away where it couldn't touch her. But children see everything, especially the things we try hardest to hide. The next morning, he'd printed out a simple flyer at the library. Room for rent. Quiet neighborhood. $600 per month. Call Michael. He'd posted it on the community board at the local grocery store, not really expecting much response. The neighborhood wasn't exactly desirable, too far from downtown, too close to the industrial district, the kind of place people ended up, not the kind they chose. Emily Carter appeared on his doorstep on a Thursday afternoon, when the rain was coming down so hard it sounded like drums on the roof. Michael had just gotten home from work, still in his oil-stained coveralls, when the doorbell rang, a sound so rare that Lily had jumped up from her coloring book in excitement. Through the peephole, he saw a young woman, maybe 20, huddled under a broken umbrella that did little to keep her dry. Her brown hair fell in wet waves past her shoulders, and she wore a beige sweater that had seen better days, faded jeans, and canvas sneakers that were soaked through. When he opened the door, she looked up at him with eyes the color of autumn leaves, golden brown and somehow both young and old at the same time. "I'm here about the room," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "I'm Emily Carter. I'm a student at the community college." She shifted the worn backpack on her shoulder, and Michael noticed how her fingers trembled slightly. Whether from cold or nervousness, he couldn't tell. There was something about her that made him think of a bird that had been caged too long and had forgotten how to fly. "I promise I'm quiet. I won't cause any trouble. I just need somewhere safe to stay." Before Michael could respond, Lily had squeezed past him, her face bright with curiosity. "Are you going to live with us?" she asked, reaching out to touch Emily's wet sleeve. "I'm Lily. I'm 7. Do you like dinosaurs? I have a book about them." Emily's face transformed with her smile, the wariness melting away as she crouched down to Lily's level. "I love dinosaurs," she said. "Especially the Triceratops. They're vegetarians, like me." Lily grabbed her hand immediately, pulling her inside before Michael could even discuss rent or rules or references. The tour of the house was brief. There wasn't much to see. The living room with its sagging couch and ancient television, the kitchen with mismatched dishes and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, the narrow hallway lined with family photos that Michael couldn't bring himself to take down. The spare room was small but clean, with a single bed, a dresser missing one drawer handle, and a window that looked out onto the alley. Emily stood in the doorway for a long moment, running her fingers along the doorframe. "It's perfect," she said quietly, and something in her voice made Michael believe she meant it. When he asked for references or identification, she fumbled with her backpack, pulling out a crumpled envelope. I forgot most of my documents," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I can get them later. Is that okay? I can pay the first month up front, in cash." She pulled out a roll of bills, counting out $600, with fingers that shook slightly. Michael knew he should insist on proper documentation, should ask more questions. But there was something about the desperation carefully hidden behind her polite smile that stopped him. Besides, Lily had already decided, dragging Emily to see her room, chattering about school and her best friend Maria, and how she was learning to ride a bike without training wheels. The first days of their new arrangement passed quietly. Emily was like a ghost in the house, leaving early for classes, returning late in the evening. She kept to her room mostly, emerging only to use the bathroom or heat up instant noodles in the microwave. But gradually, like a stray cat learning to trust, she began to venture out more. She'd help with the dishes without being asked, fold the laundry she found in the dryer, leave little notes when she noticed they were out of milk. She had a way with Lily that seemed effortless, sitting with her for hours to work on homework, teaching her card games, braiding her hair in elaborate patterns that Michael could never master. Michael began to notice things about Emily that didn't quite fit. She had a phone that looked expensive, one of those newest models with multiple cameras. But she kept it face down always, and would quickly silence it whenever it rang. Once, when she thought he wasn't looking, he saw her pull out a credit card to pay for groceries online. Not just any card, but one of those metal ones that caught the light, the kind that required a certain income level he knew no community college student could have. She tucked it away quickly, using cash at the local stores instead. There were her clothes too at first glance. They seemed ordinary. Thrift store finds like anyone on a budget might wear. But Michael had spent enough time fixing things to recognize quality when he saw it. The old sweater she wore was cashmere, soft and well-made. Her worn jeans were designer, the kind that cost more than he made in a week, artfully distressed rather than genuinely aged. She tried to hide it, but sometimes when she moved, he caught glimpses of jewelry she kept hidden under her collar, a silver chain with a pendant she never let anyone see clearly. One night, Lily woke him with a gentle shake. "Daddy," she whispered, "Emily's crying." Michael found Emily sitting on her bed, holding a silver locket, tears streaming down her face. The locket was open, revealing a photo of a woman who looked just like Emily but older, more polished, standing next to a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. Emily noticed them and quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to wake anyone." Lily climbed onto the bed beside her, wrapping her small arms around Emily's waist. "It's okay to be sad," she said solemnly. "Daddy cries sometimes too. When he thinks I'm asleep." Michael noticed the black SUV the following week. It would park at the end of their street. Engine running, tinted windows, reflecting nothing but darkness. It never stayed long, maybe an hour at most, but it appeared regularly morning, evening, sometimes late at night. When he mentioned it to Emily, her face went pale. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Probably just someone visiting the neighborhood." But that night, he saw her peeking through the curtains, her body tense with fear. The incident at the college happened on a Tuesday. Michael had taken an early lunch to pick up Lily from school for a dentist appointment when they passed through the community college campus. There was Emily, surrounded by a group of well-dressed students, their designer bags and perfect hair, marking them as different from the usual community college crowd. Michael couldn't hear the words, but he could see the cruel smiles, the mocking laughter. One girl was holding up her phone, recording, while another pushed Emily's books off the bench. Living with some broke mechanic and his kid, he heard one of them say, "How the mighty have fallen. Daddy must be so proud." Emily stood there, taking it all, her face a mask of resignation. When she saw Michael approaching, something like panic flashed in her eyes. She quickly gathered her books and intercepted him before he could reach the group. "Please," she said quietly. "Don't. It's fine. I'm used to it." There was something so defeated in her voice, so accepting of cruelty, that it made Michael's chest tight with anger. "Used to it?" he asked. "Emily, no one should be used to that." She just shook her head, hurrying away, leaving him standing there with Lily's hand in his, both of them watching her disappear into the building. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was different. Emily tried to act normal, helping Lily with her math homework. But Michael could see the strain around her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she wrote. After Lily went to bed, he found Emily in the kitchen, making tea. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that you're safe here. Whatever you're running from, whoever those people were today, this is your home now, for as long as you need it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If you knew who I really was, what I come from, you wouldn't want me here." Michael reached across the counter, covering her hand with his. "I know exactly who you are," he said firmly. "You're the person who teaches my daughter card tricks and helps her with her homework. You're the person who folds our laundry and leaves thank you notes for dinner. That's who you are to us." Everything changed the next night. Michael had just put Lily to bed when the news came on. A breaking story that made him freeze in place. "Corporate crisis at Carter Enterprises," the anchor announced, as the search continues for missing heiress Emily Carter, the only daughter of billionaire Richard Carter, who disappeared from the family estate 3 months ago. The screen filled with images, a gleaming corporate tower, a mansion that looked more like a palace, and then a photo that made Michael's heart stop. Emily, but not the Emily he knew. This Emily wore designer gowns, diamond jewelry, her hair perfectly styled, standing beside a man the caption identified as Richard Carter, CEO of one of America's largest tech empires. Michael turned to find Emily standing in the doorway, her face white as paper. "I can explain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stared at her, his mind trying to reconcile the girl in worn jeans, making instant noodles in his kitchen with the heiress on the television screen. "That's you," he said, not a question but a statement. "You're Richard Carter's daughter. You're worth billions." Emily sank onto the couch, her whole body trembling. "I ran away," she admitted, the words pouring out like water through a broken dam. "I couldn't take it anymore. The cage, the expectations, the loneliness. You don't understand what it's like. Every minute scheduled, every word scripted, every relationship a business transaction. I wasn't a daughter, I was an asset, a brand, a legacy to be managed. I just wanted to be normal, to choose my own life, to be around people who didn't care about my last name or my trust fund." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I chose your house because it looked happy. There were children's drawings in the window and flowers in mismatched pots on the porch. It looked like a place where people actually lived, not just existed. And you and Lily, you made me feel like a person again. Not a commodity, or a disappointment, or a news story. Please don't hate me for lying. This is the first time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere." Michael sat down beside her, his mind reeling but his heart steady. "I don't hate you," he said, quietly. "But Emily, your father, he must be worried sick. The news said you've been missing for 3 months. Emily's face hardened. "He's not worried about me. He's worried about the company's stock, about the family image, about losing control. He probably didn't even notice I was gone, until the board of directors started asking questions." Michael wanted to argue, to say that no father could be that cold. But then he remembered the man in the photos, stern, distant, looking at his daughter like she was a business acquisition rather than a child. "You're still Emily to us," he said finally. "Nothing's changed. But Emily, you can't run forever. Those SUVs, those people at your school, they're looking for you, aren't they?" She nodded miserably. "His security team. His lawyers. His private investigators. He won't stop until he drags me back." The danger became real 2 nights later. Michael woke to the sound of creaking floorboards. Not the familiar settling of an old house, but deliberate footsteps. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside his bed, his heart pounding. In the hallway, he found a window forced open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. Lily's door was ajar, and inside, a figure in dark clothing was standing over her bed. Michael didn't think, just acted, rushing forward with a roar that sent the intruder scrambling back through the window. Lily woke up crying, and Emily appeared, pale and shaking. "This is my fault," she said, gathering Lily into her arms. "They're trying to pressure me by threatening you. I should leave. I should never have put you in danger." But Lily clung to her, sobbing, "Don't go. Emily, please don't go." And Michael felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is your home. We protect our own." He installed new locks the next day, security bars on the windows, a camera system he couldn't really afford. Emily tried to give him money, pulling out that metal credit card, but he refused. "Family doesn't pay family for protection," he said, and watched her eyes fill with tears at the word family. They developed a routine. Michael would walk Lily to school, Emily would take a different route to college, and they'd all meet back at home together. Safety in numbers. The confrontation came on a Sunday morning, crisp and bright with the kind of autumn sun that made Boston beautiful. Michael was in the garage, showing Lily how to check oil levels, when the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs pulled up in perfect formation, and out stepped Richard Carter himself. 55 years old, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Michael made in 3 months. He looked like what he was, a man who owned the world and knew it. Behind him came lawyers in equally expensive suits, security guards with earpieces and suspicious bulges under their jackets, and a woman with a tablet, who was probably an assistant or public relations manager. The whole street seemed to hold its breath as Richard Carter walked up the cracked driveway, his polished shoes incongruous against the oil-stained concrete. "Mr. Harris," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed immediately. "I'm here for my daughter." Michael stepped forward, putting himself between the billionaire and his house, aware of how he must look in his stained jeans and old flannel shirt. "Emily's an adult," he said calmly. "She can make her own choices." Richard's eyes narrowed. "My daughter has been manipulated, possibly kidnapped, certainly taken advantage of. I'm prepared to have you arrested for harboring a runaway, fraud, possibly extortion." One of the lawyers stepped forward, already pulling out documents. "We have writs, injunctions, court orders. You can make this easy or difficult, Mr. Harris. But either way, Emily comes with us." Emily appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the small yard. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice steady, though Michael could see her hands trembling. Richard's composed mask slipped for just a second, something raw flashing in his eyes. "Emily," he said, and there was something almost pleading in his tone. "You've made your point. You've had your rebellion. Time to come home." "That's not my home," Emily said quietly. "It never was. It's a prison with marble floors and gold bars. I'm not coming back." Richard's face hardened again. "You don't have a choice. You have obligations, responsibilities, the company, the foundation, the family legacy. You can't just walk away from who you are." "I'm not walking away from who I am," Emily said, stepping forward. "I'm walking away from who you want me to be. There's a difference." She moved to stand beside Michael and Lily, who had been watching wide-eyed from behind her father. "These people have shown me more genuine care in 3 months than I got in 20 years in that mansion. They don't care about my trust fund or my connections or what I can do for them. They just care about me." Richard laughed. But it was harsh, bitter. Care about you? They care about your money. Everyone does. That's the reality of our world, Emily. At least with family, you know where you stand. Michael felt anger rise in his chest. With all due respect, Mr. Carter, you don't know anything about us. I didn't know who Emily was until 2 days ago. She's been paying $600 a month for a room barely bigger than your closet, eating instant noodles, helping my daughter with homework. If I wanted money, don't you think I would have asked for it by now? Everyone has a price, Richard said coldly. Name yours. Michael stepped forward, and the security guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. You want to know my price? Michael said, his voice low and dangerous. It's seeing my daughter smile when Emily braids her hair. It's coming home to find them baking cookies, flour everywhere, laughing at some joke I'll never understand. It's watching Emily slowly learn that she's worth more than her bank account. That's my price, Mr. Carter, and you can't afford it. Lily suddenly broke free from Michael's side, running to Emily and wrapping her arms around her waist. Don't take her away, she said to Richard, her 7-year-old voice fierce with protection. She's part of our family now. We need her, and she needs us. That's what family means, needing each other, not owning each other. Richard stared at his daughter, wrapped in the arms of this small, fierce child, and this working-class man who was willing to stand against all his power and influence. You're going to throw away everything, he said to Emily. Your inheritance, your future, your place in society. For what? To play house in this? He gestured at the modest home with disgust, this hovel. Emily straightened, and for the first time, Michael saw the steel in her that must have come from her father, turned now against him. I'm not throwing anything away, she said. I'm building something. I'm in college on a scholarship I earned myself, not because of your donations. I'm working part-time at a bookstore, earning my own money. I'm learning to cook, to budget, to be a real person. And yes, I'm choosing to stay with people who value me for who I am, not what I represent. She pulled out an envelope from her pocket. I had a lawyer, a real one. Not one of yours draw these up. I'm legally relinquishing any claim to the Carter fortune. I don't want your money, Father. I don't want your company. I don't want your life. I want my own. She held out the papers, and Richard stared at them like they were poisonous. You can't be serious, he said, but his voice had lost its commanding tone. You're my only child. Everything I've built is for you. Emily's eyes softened slightly. No, Father. Everything you built was for you. For your ego, your legacy, your control. You never once asked what I wanted. Well, now I'm telling you. I want this. I want to wake up without dreading the day. I want to make friends who don't care about networking. I want to fall asleep without anxiety medication. I want to be free. The standoff stretched, tension thick as morning fog. The lawyers whispered urgently to Richard, showing him tablets and documents. The security guards shifted restlessly. The whole neighborhood seemed to be watching from behind curtains and cracked doors. Finally, Richard took a step back. You're making a mistake, he said, but the fight had gone out of him. When you come to your senses, when this fantasy falls apart, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms. I won't, Emily said simply, because I'm not coming back. Richard turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Michael. You really don't want money? He asked, seeming genuinely puzzled. Michael shook his head. I want what's best for Emily. And right now, Mr. Carter, that's not you. As the convoy pulled away, Emily collapsed, all the strength going out of her. Michael caught her, holding her, as she sobbed, while Lily patted her back with small, comforting hands. You did it, Lily said proudly. You stood up to the bad man. Emily laughed through her tears. He's not bad, sweetie. He's just lost. He thinks money can buy everything, fix everything. He never learned that some things, the important things, can't be bought. Life settled into a new rhythm after that day. Emily continued her studies, throwing herself into her education with a passion that had nothing to do with obligation. and everything to do with genuine interest. She kept her job at the bookstore, coming home with stories about customers and coworkers, normal problems, and normal joys. She learned to cook from YouTube videos, filling the house with the smell of experiments, both successful and disastrous. She helped Lily with school projects, attended her soccer games, became the big sister Lily had never had, but always wanted. Michael watched her transformation with wonder. The scared, defensive girl, who'd shown up on his doorstep, was becoming a confident young woman. She laughed more, worried less, stopped checking over her shoulder for SUVs that no longer came. She joined study groups, made friends, went to cheap student parties, and came home talking excitedly about discussions and debates that had nothing to do with stock prices or corporate mergers. 3 months after the confrontation, a package arrived. No return address, but the quality of the packaging suggested its origin. Inside was a photo album, filled with pictures of Emily as a child riding horses, playing piano, blowing out birthday candles on elaborate cakes. But in every photo, she looked lonely, surrounded by luxury but lacking warmth. There was also a letter, brief and formal. "These belong to you, regardless of your choices. Despite everything, you are still my daughter, R.C." Emily looked through the album with Michael and Lily, telling stories about each photo. "That was my 10th birthday," she said, pointing to a picture of herself in front of a cake that looked more like an architectural model than food. 50 guests. None of them my friends. All business associates' children, there because their parents made them come. Lily studied the photo seriously. "You look sad," she observed. Emily hugged her. "I was, but I'm not anymore." Richard began visiting 6 months later. The first time, he sat stiffly in their living room, clearly uncomfortable on the worn couch, making stilted conversation. But Lily, with the fearlessness of childhood, climbed onto his lap with a book about dinosaurs and demanded he read to her. Watching the billionaire awkwardly navigate a children's book, doing voices for the different dinosaurs at Lily's insistence, Michael saw him begin to thaw. The visits became regular. Sunday dinners where Richard would arrive in increasingly casual clothes, first losing the tie, then the suit jacket, eventually showing up in khakis and a polo shirt that probably still cost more than Michael's entire wardrobe, but represented an effort. He learned to eat Emily's experimental cooking without complaint, to play board games where winning meant nothing and laughing meant everything, to exist in a space where his money and power were irrelevant. "I don't understand it," Richard admitted one evening, watching Emily and Lily build a fort out of couch cushions. "I gave her everything. The best schools, the finest clothes, opportunities other children could only dream of." Michael handed him a beer domestic, nothing fancy. "You gave her everything except choice," he said simply. "Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to choose their own path, even if it's not the one you would have chosen for them." A year passed, seasons changing over their small neighborhood. Emily graduated from community college with honors, earning her degree through her own merit. She decided to pursue social work, wanting to help other young people trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Richard offered to pay for graduate school at Harvard, naturally, but Emily chose the state university, where she'd earned another scholarship. "I need to do this myself," she told him, and for once, he simply nodded and said, "I understand." The announcement that Richard was restructuring Carter Enterprises, creating a charitable foundation focused on education and youth services, made headlines. But the bigger news, at least in their household, was Emily's decision to legally change her name, not abandoning Carter entirely, but becoming Emily Carter Harris. "If you'll let me," she said to Michael, tears in her eyes. "You and Lily gave me a family when I had none. You gave me a home when I was lost. I want to carry that with me always." Michael said yes, of course. How could he not? This young woman who'd entered their lives as a stranger had become essential to their happiness. Lily planned the celebration, a backyard party with streamers from the dollar store and a cake Emily baked herself. Slightly lopsided but made with love. Richard came, bringing wine that cost more than the monthly mortgage, but drinking beer with the neighbors. Slowly learning to exist in a world where his power meant nothing, and his presence meant everything. On a spring evening, 2 years after that first rainy day, Michael found Emily and Lily on the porch, teaching Richard to play cat's cradle with string. The billionaire's fingers, used to signing deals worth millions, fumbled with the simple pattern while Lily patiently corrected him and Emily laughed at his frustration. The sun was setting, painting the modest street in gold. And Michael realized that this simple moment was worth more than all the money in Richard's bank accounts. "You know," Richard said, finally managing the string figure correctly, "I spent my whole life building an empire. I thought legacy meant buildings with my name on them, companies that would outlast me, wealth that would span generations." He looked at Emily, really looked at her, seeing the confident, happy woman she'd become. "But watching you here, seeing who you've become, that's the real legacy, isn't it? Not what we build, but who we become, who we choose to love, how we choose to live." Emily hugged him then, the first real embrace Michael had seen between them. "You're learning, Dad," she said softly. And in that word, Dad, not father, was forgiveness, acceptance, and the promise of a relationship built on something more solid than money or obligation. The neighborhood had long since stopped gossiping about the billionaire's daughter living in the rundown rental, the mysterious Emily who'd turned out to be an heiress who'd chosen love over luxury. She was just Emily, now the girl who helped Mrs. Rodriguez with her grocery bags, who tutored kids at the community center, who was finishing her master's in social work while working at a youth shelter. She was Lily's big sister, Michael's chosen daughter. And slowly, carefully, she was becoming Richard's daughter again too, but on her own terms. Michael still worked at the auto shop, still came home with grease under his fingernails, still worried about bills and mortgage payments. But now Emily was there to help Lily with homework while he cooked dinner. He'd gotten better, with Emily's help, and sometimes Richard would stop by with takeout from restaurants Michael couldn't pronounce, and they'd eat together at the small kitchen table, talking about Lily's school play, or Emily's thesis, or absolutely nothing important at all. The black SUVs were gone, replaced by Richard's personal car, still expensive, but just one. And he drove it himself now. The security guards were gone too. Richard having learned that real safety came not from bodyguards, but from being surrounded by people who cared about you for yourself, not your wealth. He was still a billionaire, still ran a corporate empire, but he was learning to be something more, a father, a grandfather figure to Lily, maybe even a friend to Michael. On the 2-year anniversary of Emily's arrival, they recreated that first day. Emily stood on the porch in the rain. They turned on the garden hose for effect, knocking on the door with the same worn backpack. But this time, when Michael opened the door, she said, "I'm home," and she was. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had chosen to stay. Not because she was running from something, but because she was running towards something. A family not bound by blood or money, but by choice, by love, by the 1,000 small moments that make a life worth living. The spare room was still Emily's, though it had transformed over the years. Books everywhere, photos covering the walls, a desk where she wrote papers that would help other lost young people find their way. But more often than not, she could be found in the living room, helping Lily with a science project, or in the kitchen, teaching Michael her latest recipe, or on the porch, sitting with Richard as he slowly learned to be the father she'd always needed. Money, Michael had learned, could buy many things. It could buy comfort, security, opportunity, but it couldn't buy what they had built in this small house on this ordinary street. A family forged not by circumstance, but by choice. Held together not by obligation, but by love. Richard's billions couldn't purchase Lily's delighted laugh when Emily braided her hair into a crown. They couldn't buy the quiet satisfaction of Michael teaching Emily to change her own oil, her face bright with accomplishment. They couldn't buy the peace that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged, with exactly the people you were meant to be with. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Richard Carter, who could buy almost anything in the world, had found the one thing his money couldn't purchase in a rundown rental house in a working-class Boston neighborhood. He'd found it in a mechanic who barely made ends meet but would protect Emily with his life. He'd found it in a 7-year-old girl who called him Grandpa Rich and demanded he read her dinosaur books with proper voices. He'd found it in his daughter, who had to lose everything to find herself, and in finding herself, had found her way back to him, not as his heir, but as his daughter, on her own terms, in her own time. As the sun set on another ordinary day, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The four of them sat on the porch, Michael in his work clothes, Emily in her thrift store, finds that she now wore by choice, Lily in her school uniform with grass stains on the knees, and Richard in his casual clothes that still looked slightly wrong on him but were getting more natural every day. They weren't talking about anything important, just Lily's upcoming dance recital, Emily's graduation next month, plans for a camping trip that Richard was pretending not to be terrified about. To anyone passing by, they might have looked mismatched, impossible, a billionaire and a mechanic, an heiress and a little girl, sharing cheap beer and juice boxes on a porch that needed painting. But they were family. Real family. The kind that chose each other every day. The kind that knew the true value of things that couldn't be bought or sold. They were proof that love wasn't about what you could give someone, but about choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing to build something together that was worth more than all the money in the world. And in that small house, on that ordinary street, in that working-class neighborhood, they had found something extraordinary, not wealth or power or prestige, but home. Real, true, unshakable home. The kind of home that Emily had spent 20 years searching for in marble halls and golden cages. The kind of home that Michael had thought he'd lost when Sarah died. The kind of home that Lily had always known but had been made complete by Emily's arrival. The kind of home that Richard had never known existed until he'd been forced to sit on a worn couch and read about dinosaurs to a demanding 7-year-old. Money might make the world go round, but love, real, complicated, chosen love, was what made it worth living in. And in choosing each other, in building this unlikely family, they had discovered the greatest wealth of all, the knowledge that they belonged, completely and unconditionally, to each other, not because of blood or law or money, but because they had chosen it, fought for it, and continued to choose it every single day. And that choice, that commitment, that love that was priceless,